fortunate opportunity when I moved back to Philadelphia from college to get an internship at a museum here in the city called the Rosenbach Museum and Library. Has anyone ever heard of it? Oh, awesome. Okay. So one of the things when entering into the museum field, you start out either interning for 5 to 10 years before you ever actually get a job that barely pays below minimum wage or above minimum wage, and you end up starving on ramen for the rest of your life, really. So one of the benefits of having this opportunity to intern at the Rosenbach was it's an incredible rare book and manuscript library and museum. And when I had moved back to Philadelphia, it was had just undergone renovations and it was wheelchair accessible. And I had heard about this museum and I had always wanted to go, but I couldn't get there. And I remember when I called about the internship, they had literally just opened their doors like 2 weeks before. And I called up and I spoke to one of the educators and I said, I'd really like to visit, I'm in a wheelchair. And they're like, oh yes, that's fantastic. I was like, oh, because I'm also really interested in a wheelchair. They're like, we can take you here. Okay, wow, that's pretty enthusiastic. So, I show up, I have like a little interview, but they didn't really have an opening for me. It was more like I could become a docent, which is a volunteer. It's not really like tracking, all of the people who actually work there. They mostly volunteer and give tours. And if anyone's ever met a docent before, they could make a hell of a reality television program because it's all about gossip and who's giving the better tour or who's sleeping with who at the retirement home. It's like the real housewives or widows of Rittenhouse Square. So I was given this opportunity, though very shortly after this time period, to actually work on a project that has been near and dear to me because it was the first actual paid job I ever had. And it turns out that this new renovation that had come to the Rosenbach Museum and Library was from none other than Maurice Sendak, who had just bequeathed his most of his archive to the museum. And I had just graduated from majoring in art history, and I had written my undergraduate thesis in the history of photography. And it turns out that Maurice Sendak not only has his own incredible collection of illustrations, but he also collects things himself. He collected these 1929 versions of Mickey Mouse, and he described it as Mickey Mouse when he was like still a street kid and had like a really long nose and was kind of like a rat rather than a mouse. And one of the first installations that they ever did in this new wing was he donated all of his Mickey Mouse toys to the museum for this exhibition. But it turned out he also had this incredible collection of 19th century photographs that he had been collecting, since the mid-60s. And it was fascinating me on multiple levels because I was fresh out of college and I was so academically focused on this idea that I could actually not only see this collection of photographs, but I could look at them and touch them and actually get to work on them. And you might think the director of the museum and the board of trustees were insane hiring a 22-year-old girl who had never published or done anything in her life to just be bequeathed with the idea of like, why don't we have her curate an exhibition of Maurice Sendak's 19th century photographs that had never been seen before by anybody in the public. So what was so great was I was able to actually interview him because I decided, my sophisticated self, to curate an exhibition about the collector himself, as well as the interpretation of photographs. Mind-blowing, or not at all. So the director thought it was a great idea that we have this interview together over the phone, and he was so personable, and but also had a slight snarl to him. And if you ever have heard him interviewed by Terry Gross on Fresh Air, he's fascinating individual and very genuine. And the things that he had to say about these photographs were mind-blowing to me because I didn't realize up until that time that people actually collect art because they identify with it. It has nothing to do with who made the art or the time period or the pseudo-feminist theory that was coming out of scholarship in that time period. And so we were able to hang this show in this new building in this beautiful section, and I was trying to protect these photographs from being seen by the light, and we hung velvet curtain over them because some of the photographs were the first photographs that had ever been taken before. And they're talking like salt prints. And we would hang velvet curtain that was like my touch, although people after the opening came up and they're like, "Did you do that because the people in the pictures are dead?" I was like, well, they are dead, but that's not who did it. You're not really supposed to look at the pictures for very long, so you're honoring their death. I'm like, no. So I realized that there were some aspects of the show that didn't really make a lot of sense to people, but on the one hand, it was so beneficial to have the experience of actually getting to meet him. He came down, he brought flowers to me at the opening. We went out to dinner that night with some of his colleagues, some of my friends at work. We had an 8-course French meal. I vomited as soon as I got home because I'd never had so much rich food in my life. And what's so great about this story is I moved to Arizona for 6 or 7 years, and in 2010 I moved back, and what museum would give me my first job back in Philadelphia but the Rosenbach Museum and Library. I was able to see Maurice again about 2 weeks before he passed away, and it always has been this most incredible bookend to the first job I ever had in Philadelphia and the job that brought me back home. Thank you.